Over the weekend, President Biden achieved a massive and unexpected foreign policy victory, which could help undermine the growing threat of China and which is also celebrated by Biden's own conservative critics. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, so what am I talking about? Well, President Biden's done it again. This man who is constantly held to the highest and most impossible rigorous standards, not just by the right, but also by independents and large segments of the left, a man who's basically expected to solve all the world's problems unilaterally, has achieved another unexpected success despite the odds, and this one in the realm of foreign policy. So Axios and other outlets are reporting the United States, Japan, and South Korea pledge a close cooperation at historic summit. Okay, so President Biden and his counterparts from South Korea and Japan announced that they will strengthen military cooperation and turn this first ever trilateral summit into an annual tradition. It was Biden's first foreign leader summit at Camp David and marks a significant step in the rapprochement between Tokyo and Seoul, the capitals of Japan and South Korea, respectively, two U.S. allies whose historically fraught relations have thawed in recent months. So I think South Korea, as we know it today, if I remember correctly, it basically, I mean, the separation of the two Koreas, North and South, were solidified, I think, in the 50s. And in that time, even though South Korea and Japan are essentially neighbors and both have been allies of the United States since the formation of South Korea or the establishment of South Korea as we know it today and post-World War II Japan. So even though we all had these things in common, South Korea and Japan have never met like with one another, like officially on a diplomatic situation, and not even with the United States either, in 70 years. So this is an extraordinary achievement. But this also comes amongst a time that China is increasing military and economic pressure to try to, as most security experts and foreign policy experts say, China's ambition is to replace the United States as the dominant military and political and economic power. So this trilateral agreement between Japan, South Korea, and the United States is extraordinarily important. So let's see. They formalized a series of new commitments on diplomatic, economic, and military cooperation. The military agreements include a multi-year military exercise plan, deeper coordination on ballistic missile defense, and a new crisis communication hotline. In a joint press conference, Biden stressed that our world stands at an inflection point in which it's particularly important to find new ways to work together. Biden praised the political courage of his counterparts for taking the steps Friday. Yoon, who I think is the president of South Korea, in particular has faced strong domestic backlash for prioritizing reconciliation with Japan due to historic Japanese abuses dating back to the colonial era. So that's the other thing, too. It's not like their lack of cooperation appeared in a vacuum. I mean, going back to pre-World War II era, there have been, how do I want to say this? There's been a long historic tension between Japan and the people of South Korea and their forebears. So there's quite a lot of baggage associated with this. This marks a remarkable step towards reconciliation at a time when that reconciliation is vitally important, because it would be too easy to just defer to old tensions at a time when diplomacy is needed most. But these leaders are doing the right thing by stepping up and saying, listen, past abuses need to be addressed, to be sure, but there are present and future threats that have to take the priority. That's leadership. Let's see. Asked whether U.S. relationships with South Korea and Japan could break down if Donald Trump is elected in 2024, Biden said Trump's America's First policies had weakened America, but he believes institutional changes announced Friday will only strengthen over time. I mean, it's always possible that, God forbid, if Trump is reelected, that because he is so undiplomatic and so unlikable and so short-sighted and stupid and corrupt and all the adjectives that we know that Donald Trump is, that he would walk back the progress in this respect. But hopefully, none of that will happen. But yeah, this is extraordinary. And here's how you know it's extraordinary. The National Review, which is one of the most prominent conservative news outlets, even they wrote an op-ed praising President Biden here. The Japan-South Korea alliance is a breakthrough for Biden. On Friday, President Biden achieved a foreign policy breakthrough with potentially massive implications for China's designs across its neighborhood, a Camp David summit with Japanese Prime Minister and South Korean President. Okay? They should be natural allies. They have had a strained relationship owing to long-standing historical controversies related to Japan's decades-long occupation of Korea. That history stood in the way of building a united front of America's allies in the region capable of countering Beijing, capital of China. But Biden's attention to this dynamic and the political courage of the two presidents might have just ushered in a new relationship between the countries. And we won't read the whole article here, but it's very praiseworthy, which is, again, ironic and unlikely coming from something like the National Review. So that's how you know that this is actually an impressive achievement. Now, again, it's in the preliminary settings, and certainly neither Japan nor South Korea have, it's not like they're playing on equal footing with China in that respect. But you look at, Australia is another major ally of the United States that we have primed to try to resist China to the best of our ability. And now adding like Seoul, South Korea, and Tokyo, Japan, adding those two countries, Japan and South Korea, to the mix, and having us be a united front to offer local resistance, such as it is, to China's ambitions. That's extraordinary, and it will help preserve, to whatever extent this matters to you, the current model of the world in which China is it's a growing economic and military power, second only to the United States. But steps like this will ensure or help delay at least the possibility that China can truly rival and perhaps even exceed the United States. So this is really great for the Biden administration. It's great for the United States. It's great for Japan, South Korea, and the rest of the non-Chinese bloc Western world, so to speak. And it's so good, again, that Biden is getting credit from people who are just so laser focused and so super inclined to never give him credit in the first place. And that's how you should know it's a big deal.